All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this work session. We thank you guys so much for logging in. The topic of this particular conversation is getting DeKalb back to work. And what a time-sensitive conversation that is, as we have just, looked at that 1 year after a global pandemic. The conversation on everyone's tongue right now is workforce development. And so we have pulled together some experts in the area of workforce development to talk about DeKalb County specifically and some of the strategies and best practices around getting individuals back into the workforce as we continue to try to rebound from this global pandemic. Before I get started introducing the panelists for this morning, I want to introduce myself. My name is Shemeeka Johnson. I'm the Communications Director at the Technical College System of Georgia Office of Workforce Development. So we are the state WorkSource Georgia office and the administrators of the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So thank you so much for joining us on this conversation, and we'll jump right in. Representing Atlanta CareerRise as their executive director, we have Mr. John Helton. John, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Representing Emory University as the executive director of their Career Center, we have Mr. Paul Fowler. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Representing East Metro DeKalb Community Improvement District, we have Executive Director Christopher Sanders. Thank you so much, Christopher, for joining us. We have representing the City of Stonecrest Economic Development, Mr. Clarence Boone, as the Senior Director of Economic Development. Thank you so much, Mr. Boone, for joining us. And then last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Brandon Ona, representing WorkSource DeKalb as the Workforce Business Analyst. Gentlemen, thank you so much this morning for talking to us. Just to start us off, I'm going to pose a question to the entire panel, and I just ask that you take a few moments to address it. How would you define the future of work? When we start talking about what workforce will look like in the very near future, how would you describe in your areas what that looks like? Brandon, we'll start with you.
Oh, I was hoping somebody else would go first to answer this complicated question. In terms of the future of work, I think above all, we're going to need to, what we're going to be seeing is individuals that need to be flexible and adaptable to the changing industries that exist. Definitely skills training is going to be a norm, continuing skills training, whether that's in person or virtual, and hopefully sponsored through companies and industry associations. I think we're definitely going to see some element of technology enter in just about every job function. So that's how I would define it.
John, do you have anything to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I love the fact that you started with flexibility, because I think the future of work is flexibility. And I mean, obviously, look at the past year since March 13th of 2020, how we've completely changed the way that we work. The fact that we're having this conference as we're having it right now is evidence of that. And that's not going away. I mean, if you talk to employers, and the most recent research of employers is that there's a new openness to this flexibility and even maintaining the flexibility that we have tested and experimented with over the past 12 months. And that we'll continue to do that when the pandemic gets to wherever it's going to go in terms of making things more safe for people to be together again. I think the other thing is, looking from a workforce development perspective, really two things. From the employer side, really thinking about employers being more open to alternate education paths. Increasingly over the past few years, we've seen less reliance on strict educational requirements and really looking toward what's more, Brandon, to your point, stackable credentials and things that are really more task specific, as opposed to just having categorical requirements for people to begin work. And then from the training perspective, I think more things that are virtual. And we'll talk about that more too, Shemeeka.
Thank you. Mr. Fowler, can you speak to what that looks like in the near future university?
And sure, and it's nice to come at it through the lens of higher education, and the pandemic has certainly accentuated, I guess, an internal struggle which has been ongoing in higher education as to what is the value of higher education. A liberal arts institution versus a professional school versus a trade school, and trying to figure out the catchphrase much around competency. Is there an echo? Are y'all getting that echo?
A little bit, but we can hear you.
Okay, let me just. You're in the test. Is that better? Not really, but I apologize. We were testing this yesterday. When I turned everything off and back on.
Ourselves until we speak, that might help.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Maybe if we all mute ourselves until we speak, that might help.
All right, I appreciate that. Okay, so again, from higher education's perspective, looking at a lot of focus on competency. You know what? I'm actually going to. Yesterday, I jumped out completely and jumped back in. Let me try that.
Okay, that sounds good. And while you do that, I just want to pivot a little bit to you, Mr. Sanders. When we think about how workforce and economic development work together, can you just talk to us a little bit just to kind of bring us into this portion of the conversation? How do we see workforce development in the near future playing a role as far as the turn of the economy and us beginning to rebound from COVID?
I mean, I believe that it's very important is that as we continue to go out and attract businesses and businesses come into the area, that we need to be able to show that the workforce that's needed to do the jobs therefore is there. So we need to constantly make sure that we're working with all the local partners to marry up what is needed with what is actually in the marketplace. And if there's a gap, we figure out how to shorten that gap. As everybody's already alluded to, we're going to have everything's going to be pivoting now. Technology is going to be not just integrating everything, but it's going to basically put everything on steroids. That companies are going to be looking to, as they always do, cut costs, shorten margins, maximize profits, and they're going to try and use our technology as much as possible. So those workforce need to be able to be others on the panel said adaptable. I want to say be creative and think about where their skills are now and how that's going to get to where the future is going to be. But that's going to be a key economic development component, is making sure that we have within a reasonable radius of where the businesses are going to be located, that we have the skills that can meet that need.
Got you. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Boone, I want to ask you if you could identify 3 areas of focus that the county as a whole should be focused on in order to ensure not only the stability of DeKalb County's workforce, but also their economic position. What would you say those 3 primary areas of focus should be?
Well, I'd say that of those 3, probably collaboration more than anything else. I've had an opportunity to work with Brandon through the side DeKalb and some other organizations, through WorkSource DeKalb, through relationships with Georgia Piedmont Technical College and Georgia Power Economic Development and the U.S. Department of Economic Development, as well as some other organizations. So I think collaboration is certainly the biggest factor. But I think that one of the things that's happened with during the pandemic, when people had a chance to really step back and take a pause, is that some folks were able to take advantage of the opportunity to be able to educate themselves and acquire more skills and achieve certifications in some areas that either were important to their careers or that they had interest in that could develop other opportunities. So I think education was a big piece. But then also, as far as from a business perspective than anything else, I think that as John mentioned before, and Paul did as well, and Brandon did as well, was with the advent of technology. From a business perspective, being able to get past the gatekeeper in many respects before the pandemic was difficult. Through technology, those opportunities to meet are much simpler, much more effective in terms of being able to expedite the process. And I think a lot of connections are going to be made for small business and for individuals that will certainly help them out in the long run.
Got you. Thank you so much. Just a little bit of logistics. We did get in contact with tech support, and they just asked that everyone mute their mics until they're ready to speak, and that should help with a little bit of the feedback frequency that we're experiencing. So if you could manually mute your mic down at the bottom there until you're ready to speak, I think that might help some of our tech issues. But I'm so glad, Mr. Boone, that you touched on how other partners are working together to address these issues, because that led me into my next question. John, if you could speak to this part a little bit. When we talk about regional partnerships, what type of regional partnerships do you believe have been enhanced since the pandemic? I mean, we've had to rely on each other essentially to figure out a new norm and how to keep business flowing. So what do you think have been critical regional partnerships that have helped during this time?
Yeah, Shemeeka, one of the silver linings, if you can say that, about COVID has been that it's really made us think in different ways about how to get work done. And many of you here on the call are very familiar with the WorkSource Georgia system, which is our network across the state of workforce development agencies and career one-stop through the WIOA, or Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that's administered through the Technical College System of Georgia. In the Metro Atlanta area, we have 5 of those 19 workforce boards that are across the state, and have these 5 directors and workforce areas have begun working together in ways that we never thought possible, and really through the lens of a racial equity framework. And that's because, as we know, the population, the segment of our workforce that we have now dubbed our essential workforce, those have been lower wage workers and workers without traditional means of achieving economic mobility. So our 5 workforce areas have begun working together with industry on looking at ways that we can better serve customers and give access to our public workforce system. So one of the tools that has been developed during this process is atlworks.org. And when I stop talking, I'll put that in the chat box so that everyone can see it. But now we have a singular point of entry. Historically, and I come from this system and have been part of this system for a very long time, so I can speak with some critique, I guess. Prior to us having the process that we've engaged in over the past year, there were 5 different separate ways for people across the Metro Atlanta region to access WIOA-funded job training. And now there's a singular point of entry by which people can go to atlworks.org and hear the same messaging and understand that there's a similar application process, and then get assigned to their respective area to be served for job training. So from the public workforce system, it's been really cool to see that convergence and really working together to figure out how we can make better access to the system. And then from the employer workforce system connection, employers are just getting hugely creative. We created the Metro Atlanta Industry Partnership, or MAPE, as a venue and a platform to make those connections between workforce agencies and employers. And some really cool things have come out of that in terms of job training and virtual job training. Employers really working together to on a sector basis to try to create training programs to feed the sector. Actually, there are a couple of offerings that I'll put in the chat box, and if I have the chance, I'll talk about them later too. But I'll turn it back to you, Shemeeka.
You. And I think that the key word that I heard from you was creative. And, not only are workforce development professionals becoming creative during this time, but what we've also seen is that job seekers are also becoming more creative and innovative when it comes to their career. Mr. Fowler, I want to pose the next question to you. When you are administering services, at the Career Center, the conversation always comes up about freelance work and this idea of a gig economy. Do you see that being a new norm as far as workforce development is concerned, now that individuals are starting to figure out new ways to generate income? Talk a little bit about that.
Great. And this actually dovetails right on what I was going to say earlier, but didn't get a chance to say. So I appreciate the coming right back to picking up where I left off. And one of the things that we've been looking at when I was talking about sort of the debate within higher education is what's the value, what's the purpose, what's the competency development of a student, whether it be at an Emory University or a Chattahoochee Tech. What are the competencies that are being provided to students so they can be successful in any role. And we talk about, particularly with our students who think that, you know, their first job, they're going to go into that role knowing exactly what to do and set the world on fire. And I keep telling our students, nobody's hired into the job and able to do that job on day one. What they're hiring you to do, or what they're hiring you is based on the belief that you have the competence to move into that role successfully, and that you have the skill development. And we've been looking at a lot of the data and a lot of the reports. And as you might imagine, higher education, we do a lot of surveying and research. And consistently over the years, 10 years ago, there was a study, and last year there was a study, and the top 5 competencies that consistently come out of what recruiters are looking for are communication, teamwork, leadership, problem solving and critical thinking, and this customer service, sales, or persuasion. And that's what's been the real debate in higher education is because we're all trying to find our niche. But at the end of the day, whether we're training accountants or auto mechanics to be successful, ultimately success is going to become on these competencies which are learned, which are developed, which are gained through experiential opportunities. And so that's where for us and our students, and I run our career center no different. I was talking with some folks yesterday from the technical colleges of Georgia systems. When I go to conferences, I spend more time with my peers at the technical colleges, because at the end of the day, it's the return on investment, and whether somebody spends $250,000 of an education and that's a sacrifice, or they're spending $2,000 or $3,000 and sacrificing for that education. It's still, what's the return on investment? And it's one thing to have a skill or a trade, but if you don't have these certain competencies which allow you to be successful in a role, to lead, to work in a team. And so for our students, again, as a university, we are helping students in these areas of competency. But at the end of the day, I'm telling our students, I kind of take them off their pedestal a little bit, say, you're not going to set the world on fire on day one. What you're going to do is go in and be humbled, but be able to learn and acquire and gain that experience based on these competencies that they're looking for. And so that's where we really focus is not so much on training up a good accountant or training up a good consultant or analyst. That comes with experience, internships, education. What's going to make students successful is that they have competencies that make humans successful.
That was awesome. We even had a couple people in the chat ask to list those competencies, and I think Teresa did list them. Those are awesome transferable skills that work across any industry. Mr. Sanders, I'd like to pivot to you for the next question. When we think about transferable skills, another thing that's on the minds of job seekers are, the industries that will see growth as we turn, a rebound from COVID. So can you talk about certain industries that you are expecting to inflate a little bit when it comes to how we begin to rebuild our economy and rebuild the workforce? What industries should we be on the lookout for?
Well, since we're in the great state of Georgia and we have access to the wonderful Port of Savannah, any logistical manufacturing are going to be the two big booms, especially once we finish dredging the port and we can start taking those big Panamax ships. That's going to just make everything just go gangbusters. So anything related to those industries, especially logistics, distribution hubs, the endpoint shipment pieces, and then now with everybody, me included, doing the Amazon and direct to home, that last big connectivity is going to be big too. So you're going to see an increase in that delivery point. So basically the entire supply logistical chain is going to be growing over the next couple of years.
Thank you. And then Brandon, I want to ask you, we've talked about the industries that will receive growth, but what industries have you seen have taken the biggest hit as far as COVID is concerned? What industries have experienced the greatest decline?
That's a really good question. And I saw that Greg Wilson was on the chat. I think he's all of our go-to person for these types of questions, because he's such a data wonk and knows just about everything about this. But from what we've seen in DeKalb in terms of the initial unemployment claims, the two industries that were hit the most were, one, the hospitality industry. So hotels, restaurants, culinary. I mean, that has really taken a huge hit. Conferences probably aren't going to be happening anytime soon in person. They're going to be like this. And we've definitely seen, especially at a lot of our regional job fairs and recruitment events that John and his team put together, that's consistently one of the main groups of people that are still looking for work. And the other one, believe it or not, was healthcare, actually, from the work that we were doing. And it kind of ties into the point that was made in the opening session, which was pretty much everything that was elective or, virtually all healthcare services kind of stopped at once. So it's slowly over time kind of rebounding and coming back. But that has been impacted. And from what we've heard anecdotally from our major healthcare providers here in DeKalb, is that they're probably going to be moving to different models moving forward. That you're probably going to, be talking to your physician, your primary care physician via telehealth as your first step from now on. And that's going to, pose its own challenges in terms of retraining the workforce. So yeah, those are the two main areas. Pre-COVID, just to touch on that, I think retail was something that always showed up as a declining industry. And I still think to some degree that's the case. Although when you look at something like grocery, that really took a huge step in growth. But I say that to say I think there's a lot of changing, and the best way we're going to understand this and see this is probably a couple of years from now. Specifically when you're looking at something like grocery, which was or retail that was supposed to be declining. A lot of our retail companies have become distribution and logistics companies in a way. When we looked at some of our projects that we were locating here in DeKalb, it was things like GoPuff, which is a grocery delivery service. The freelance gig economy saw a huge rise in the number of people that they were employing in DeKalb. So there's a lot of changes, and I think we're going to get a really good idea on what that will look like in the coming years.
And I'm glad that you ended with changes in the coming years, because the norm or workforce as we know it will look different, and that's something that I think has been on the tongues of everyone that work in this space. So, Mr. Boone, if you would speak to the subject of automation. What do you think is the future of automation in terms of workforce? And do you see automation being something that is incorporated into the new norm as far as workforce development is concerned in the future?
Direct the question to Shemeeka.
To you, Mr. Boone.
Okay, I think that automation will be a very important part of what's going to result from the COVID and the pandemic. It's been mentioned by everyone here that technology is going to be a key factor, and it's not even so much. We've got to take a look at automation and technology as well within that. I think you're going to have people who are we talked about training and some other things. People who are able to get into fields that they never thought they could have before because of access, because of training. But I think that while I hope that through technology, automation has its place, certainly the ability to be able to hire people for jobs is going to always be key. And we've got to be able to make sure that our folks are trained, that they have opportunities, and we make sure that to the extent we can, and with everything that we do, we make sure that we push that message forward to be able to make sure that we have our people ready to participate in the workforce.
So I just want to remind the individuals that are viewing this conversation that our chat window is still open. So if you do have any questions for the panelists, please drop it in the chat. We have just shy of 20 minutes left in this conversation, so we do want to get to as many of your questions as possible. But one last scripted question that we have that I'd like to pose to the entire panel, talk about innovation and ways that your particular organization has been innovative in your approach to keep business and workforce development moving during these unprecedented times. And Ms. Sanders, I'd like to begin with you.
Yes, ma'am. So with the East Metro CID, we actually our mission is to focus on advocating for the commercial and industrial property owners. We've had to, like everybody else, pivot to virtual. A lot of businesses were locking down. A lot of property owners weren't allowing face-to-face with a lot of people. So we had to go virtual and start doing a lot of one-on-one conversations instead of mass gatherings, emails, just utilizing technology to the best we can to communicate to property owners, let them know what's going on in the area, how we're improving. One big thing to show improvement in the area and leveraging technology is that last June, we installed about 8 flock safety cameras to help with DeKalb police kind of crack down on some of the public safety concerns. We did our first set of 8 cameras. Actually, we're in Mr. Boone's area over in Stonecrest off of Turner Hill. That's been great success, and we're going to be looking over the next couple of years of growing that program out. We're trying to limit, especially with everything that we've seen in the news these past this past year and even going into this year. We want to make sure that we're helping our brave men and women in the police force have everything they need to do what they need to do so we can continue to keep our area safe. So we are attracting businesses in the area, so we have jobs for people in the area, so we can make the area grow. So everything is a piece and a giant wheel, and we're just one piece of trying to do what we can so we can all work together and make DeKalb one great place to work.
Amazing, and congratulations on your success in that area thus far. John, I'd like to pivot to you to brag a little bit about some of the innovative ways that you guys have continued to keep business flowing during this time.
Thanks, Shemeeka. This is my opportunity to backtrack, actually, and talk about a couple of things that I posted in the chat after one of my earlier comments, and that is virtual training and using our Metro Atlanta Industry Partnership to help support the region's higher growth sectors. And many of you know the Metro Atlanta Industry Partnership has selected information technology, TDL, which stands for Transportation, Distribution, Logistics, and healthcare, and then also advanced manufacturing and skilled trades as our targeted sectors to really work from a sector strategy perspective. And I would like to lift up 2 initiatives that if you scroll back up into the chat, you saw Accelerate Atlanta, which is Microsoft's offering. That's a huge investment that they've made. And there are several providers here in the Atlanta area that you can locate by going to that website. But that's free Microsoft training to eligible individuals. And again, this is an effort on Microsoft's part to create racial equity strategies that help create economic mobility. And then in addition to that, Prologis, you may not be familiar with Prologis, but they are the landlord for companies like Amazon and UPS and FedEx. They have millions of square footage of distribution center facilities as well as warehouse facilities across the world. And have a huge presence here in Atlanta. So it was in their interest to create TDL training. And there's a virtual self-paced training that I've put into the chat box, the link there, where people can sign up individually and have an entree into the transportation distribution and logistics sector free of charge as well. So take a look at both of those, and I'm going to put my email here if you're an organization that wants to partner to try to do it in a more formal, organized way. At Atlanta CareerRise, we're here to help, and the Metro Atlanta Industry Partnership is using this to help support our work.
Thank you so much, John. Mr. Fowler, I'd like to pivot to you and talk a little bit about what's going on at Emory and how you've been innovative during this time.
Thanks. It's not often you hear somebody say one of the upsides of a pandemic, but we've managed to find some upsides to a pandemic, and even so much that even after the pandemic, we plan to continue certain practices. And for us in connecting students, I always say for universities, it's one thing to get them all dressed up for the big dance, but if you're not teaching them how to dance, who they're going to the dance with, and what dance they're dancing, then it's just a big tease. And so from our side of taking one, having them all dressed up and then getting them to the dance, universities, residential universities are so much everything on campus, and we do events, we do on-campus recruiting, we do career fairs, we do networking events on campus, which limits who can come to campus. We do networking events and pull from the Atlanta Metro alumni and friends and recruiters that are willing to come and spend time with us. Now that students are accustomed to being on virtual platforms such as this, we've now opened up the world to our students. And so we've done a number of networking events with alums who could never make it from California to Atlanta for an evening to talk to students. And so we now have gone from a pool of several thousand to several 100,000 alums at our disposal to assist students. We've also found that the recruiters who, again, being in Atlanta, it's a great location. They can fly into Atlanta fairly easy, find a place to stay, hit multiple institutions. Now, as I can see on the screen here, some of you from the comfort of your homes are conducting business. And so organizations in their recruiting efforts are saving tons of money to offset losses that the organizations have likely incurred by not actually flying, not actually traveling, hotel rooms, swag. So we're able to increase the number of employers in front of students. And then the last piece is the fact that with many institutions moving to virtual and not having so much on-campus activities, our students are actually able to engage in fall and spring internships that normally for many students are very active during the school year and involved in clubs, organizations, athletics. None of that's happening. So our students are going to class, turning off their screen, and then staring at the walls. They're able to actually engage in where we never would, well, not never, we rarely posted many fall or spring internships because students just simply didn't have the time or the energy to invest in them. Now we're seeing a lot more organizations realizing they can tap talent year round at traditional residential universities because students have time in their hand. Now, I don't know if that will extend when we're full density. And then the other piece I will add is as from a student perspective or a preparation for the future, the pandemic highlighted some significant gaps in the management of our country, in the management of corporate America, in the management of healthcare America. And so we anticipate seeing, and that's one of the areas, and I'm going to actually post in the chat, Phil Gardner up at Michigan State does a Collegiate Employment Research Institute where they do a recruiting trends, and they literally talk to recruiting organizations coming to colleges and universities. This year's is very telling. That report right there is very telling about the trends of recruiting industries, what's up, what's down. I've got, and I won't go into those, but do download that report. It's incredibly insightful. But Gallup did a report, and it really looked at the sort of ill preparedness of our government, ill preparedness of our healthcare, corporate America to respond to a crisis real time. Now, again, I think as a country, we responded over time very well, but it has heightened the need for us to be always in imminent crisis mode. And what that's going to do for the workforce, what that's going to do for training of the workforce, what kind of skills are going to come out of that, and what types of jobs are going to come out of that, where literally it's all, you think about insurance, we pay all this money for insurance and we're happy if we never use it, but we're frustrated we never use it because we paid all this money and we got nothing for it. There's going to be some type of roles and opportunities out there where people are doing nothing and getting probably great salaries, but yet the moment they're needed, their jobs will be critical. And I just don't know what that's going to look like, but that's certainly something that we're seeing our students starting to think about. They're very much humanitarian focused students, government, industry, policy focused. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of change in the future.
you so much. And that was so much great information. So thank you for posting it in the chat as well, so that everyone can use it as a resource after this conversation. Mr. Boone, I'd like to pivot to you. Talk a little bit about what's going on in the city of Stonecrest and how you guys have been able to use innovation to rebound during this time. We're not able to hear just yet.
I muted my microphone to be able to make sure we didn't have any background noise. From a standpoint of a municipality, whether it be a city, state, or a county, we've got to understand from an economic development standpoint the tried and true measure before March 11th, 2020 would have been to take a look at business attraction, business recruitment, business expansion, business retention, business development, business stabilization was probably the last thing anybody thought about. But right now that paradigm has shifted 180 degrees. We've got to take a look at those former lesson priorities as the new priorities right now. We've got to be able to make sure that our businesses are strong. The city of Stonecrest has just recently finished, as the other county municipalities, has just finished our COVID Care Small Business Relief Program, and we specifically targeted those businesses that we knew were necessary to be able to grow our city and our economic base. But in addition to that, we've also have to realize that once again it's important to be able to make sure that our citizens are able to take advantage of it. So many, unfortunately, and we're very sympathetic to our business community that's suffered and people that have had job changes, is to be able to make sure that we develop relationships, as I mentioned before, with the DeKalb, with WorkSource DeKalb, with Georgia Piedmont, with Georgia Power Economic Development, with the University of Georgia Small Business Development Center, with DeKalb WorkSource Development, to be able to find out how we can, as we're working to be able to help small businesses, be able to make sure that our citizens are prepared for any opportunities that present themselves, and how they can either take advantage of things, or to be able to put a foundation underneath them to be able to continue to work well. But in our city, one of the things that we're doing, we're looking to do this year, is to be able to have someone dedicated to being able to reach out to our top employers every month, to be able to find out what are the jobs that are available, what are the requirements, what are you looking for, so we can implement some strategies of being able to establish some job fairs, either virtual or in person, whenever those opportunities exist. But I think that what's going to come out of it a lot. Paul mentioned it just now, and is that how we're all learning to pivot. You know, we're learning that it's not the same as it's been. What will come out of it when the pandemic is over will be a completely different situation. It will be a hybrid of what we had plus what's needed. You know, I know that in talking to business owners that have prepared themselves academically for their job. Now they're going back to a skill level training to be able to get some additional resources and education to be able to make themselves better, because they realize that it's not just academic, it's not just skill level. And those are some of the things that we're doing. We're very fortunate in that even during the pandemic, some programs that we were working with came to fruition. So we're very excited about it. We know that there's some, in looking at the chat box, we look at some industries that have been affected greatly by the pandemic. As we mentioned before, we just finished our COVID Cares program. We specifically looked at those industries to be able to make sure that we supported them as well. So that's something we've learned. We believe that the future is bright in Stonecrest. We know that where we are right now is not where we're going to be, but we've learned lessons from the past that we're ready to implement and make our city better.
Thank you so much. And Brandon, we started the conversation with you, so we're going to end with you in terms of WorkSource DeKalb. What are some creative ways that you guys have been able to administer services during this time?
That's such a good question. One of the things that has been going on in DeKalb for the past year is a direct connection between WorkSource DeKalb, the workforce development arm of the county, and Decide DeKalb Development Authority, which is the economic development arm, actually through this position that I'm in now. And that came from our public-private partnership, really from the business community, who said, those two efforts need to be aligned for us to grow and develop our county. So some of the specific innovations and initiatives that we have going on, the first one I want to touch on, relates to a lot of what we're talking about today. One of the things that we learned actually from one of the programs or events that John and his group put together was that companies, what's top of mind for them more than anything coming out of the pandemic is pipeline. They need to make sure that they have the right people coming in and to meet the changes in their industry and also the people leaving the industry through retirement or pivots or whatnot. And that was something that had been reaffirmed to us plenty of times over. So we really wanted to do something about that. We're working on a manufacturing and distribution initiative to in a comprehensive way, engage our young people in the schools, their educators, their teacher, or their educators, their parents, counselors, et cetera. And then, of course, lead them into really strong programs that we have in the county and the metro area related to automation through our technical college and through some of the other training providers we have. The other initiative that we have going on is around technology and IT. When we were talking to our companies, and these weren't necessarily IT companies, the number one investment or expense of the past year was not necessarily on PPE. It was actually on technology, pretty much across the board. From your small business that had an old school cash register that needed to upgrade to a POS so they could take online orders, to a manufacturing plant that now had to somehow figure out how to put a mobile device in everyone's hand. That way they could communicate and socially distance and make sure that they're checking those regular stats that they need to monitor. So one of the things that we realized was, as we were polling our data reports, we could pull as much as we wanted to, but nothing really replaced that good insight that we got from companies that said, hey, we need folks in cloud computing. We need folks that understand CRM, or we just need folks for help desk purposes. So we not only did we have a training program through WorkSource during this time to train entry-level IT services, which was very helpful and I think something that the business community is going to really benefit from. But we're also launching engagement into the industry, working with companies to understand, from a survey standpoint, what their needs are, what their workforce challenges are. Then we're going to work to assemble some sort of group of leaders and then help that inform what we're doing. We know that the business community in DeKalb is going back to the first point, is going to adopt more and more tech-based operations. We need to be prepared and able to meet those demands as they happen. And we're doing this in DeKalb, but it's happening all throughout the metro region. So I think we're in good company.
And not only a good company, but it sounds like in terms of economic development and workforce development, from what you gentlemen have described this morning, DeKalb County is in great hands. I just want to say thank you again for joining us as panelists for this discussion. We appreciate your time this morning. Just a quick announcement, the Expo and Networking session are going on right now, so you can click that in your sessions tab, and then I think the closing session will begin at 11:10. Gentlemen, thank you again for participating in this panel. Be safe and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.